We didn't order for you. That's what my manager told me while he slid a fork into a piece of steak that cost more than my weekly groceries. I was standing right there in a pressed shirt I'd ironed 3 times, watching them cut into $1,000 plates, like I was the waiter who'd walked too close. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I just had that feeling you get when a chair you've been sitting on for years suddenly breaks and you realize it was cracked the whole time. My name's Evan, and I'm the kind of employee you never notice unless something's broken. I show up early, leave late, fix other people's spreadsheets, and quietly save everyone from their own mistakes. I'm not flashy. I don't network. HR loves to call people like me reliable. Managers love it too, as long as you stay in the background and clap at the right time. My manager, Clark, is the opposite of me in every way that counts in corporate. Loud laugh, expensive watch, the kind of handshake that feels like a sales pitch. He calls everyone buddy when he wants something and pal when he's about to throw you under the bus. To upper management, he's results driven. To the team, he's the guy who takes credit for your work and then tells you you're not quite leadership material when promotion time comes. The year everything snapped, our department landed the biggest contract we'd ever had. $10 million over 3 years with a multinational client. New systems, new staff, new bonuses. At least that's how they framed it at the all-hands meeting. The truth is, 3 of us did most of the work. Clark talked the loudest about it, and the company rewarded him for having vocal cords. I was one of those 3. For 6 weeks, I lived inside that project. Late nights, weekend calls, rewriting reports at midnight because the font doesn't feel premium enough for the client deck. I built the cost models, risk scenarios, and half the slides Clark presented like they'd fallen fully formed out of his head on the Uber ride over. I didn't complain. I told myself that's how it works. You put in the work, people notice eventually. Corporate sent us a thank you, Clark announced one Monday, clapping his hands like a game show host. We were gathered in the open office. 12 desks, 1 dying plant, coffee that tasted like it resented being brewed. The client comped a dinner for the core team. Real place, real stakes. Friday night, dress like you've met soap before. People laughed. I felt something warm in my chest. I hadn't been on one of those core team things before. I don't drink much or tell loud stories, and those nights always looked like a performance I hadn't been cast in. But this time, I'd earned it. I knew that. Everyone knew that. So who's going? Someone asked. Clark glanced at his phone, tapping his thumb on the screen. Me, obviously, he said. Then Dana from account management, Liam from sales, and a couple of folks from finance. We've only got 8 seats. Clients paying per head. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked over me like I was a part of the furniture. My stomach did a small, stupid flip. Anyone from the modeling side? Jenna, our analyst, asked. She was sitting opposite me. I saw her eyes flick in my direction. Clark shrugged. We'll see. Waiting for a confirmation on a couple of execs. You know how it is. Politics. He said the last word like he was a victim of it, not the one playing. By lunchtime, rumors were moving faster than emails. People whispered about the restaurant, fixed menu, Wagyu steaks, wine poured from bottles with names you can't pronounce without a sommelier license. Someone pulled up the place on Google. The first thing I saw was the price. I clicked my screen off before I had to look at the numbers twice. I could have asked. I could have gone into Clark's office, shut the door, and said, Hey, I basically built that deck, right? Am I on the list? But I've never liked begging for the respect I already earned. It makes any yes feel like charity. Friday afternoon, 4:30 p.m., an email popped up. Tonight's dinner. Attendees. 8 names. I scanned the list twice. Mine wasn't there. Jenna swiveled in her chair. You're not on it? She whispered. Nope, I said, like I'd already known. Guess I'm the backup generator. Only noticed when the power cuts. That's ridiculous, she muttered louder than she meant to. Clark walked by at that exact moment, a coat over his arm, tie loosened just enough to say relaxed authority. Problem? He asked. Jenna hesitated. I saved her. Just wrapping up the weekly numbers, I said. You guys have fun tonight. He gave me that smile managers have when they can tell themselves everything's fine because you're not actively bleeding on their carpet. Somebody's got to keep the ship running, huh, Evan? I'll bring back stories. Stories don't pay invoices, I said, but only in my head. By 6, most of the floor was empty. The cleaners were doing their slow, apologetic laps around the desks. I finished a report no one would read until Monday and stared at the little green dot next to Clark's name in our chat app. Knowing he wouldn't see any message I sent now, he was probably already at the bar, laughing too loudly at something he'd repeat later as his own joke. At 7:15, my phone buzzed. It was Jenna. I'm here. It's insane. You should be here instead of half these people. She sent a blurry photo of a table, white tablecloths, low light, glasses shining like they'd been polished for hours. I saw Clark's watch in the corner of the frame, catching the light, his hand wrapped around a glass of red. I locked my screen and closed my laptop. Sitting alone in an empty office while your boss eats your share of the celebration is a very specific kind of humiliation. It's quiet, almost polite. No yelling, no arguments. Just absence. On the way home, I told myself I didn't care. I grabbed a burger from a drive-thru, parked in my apartment lot, and ate it in the car, staring at the dashboard, the striped wrapper crackling every time I moved my hand. The burger tasted like salt and cardboard. I imagined the stakes. I told myself that was jealousy talking and tried to push it down. At 8:40, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Clark. Hey, buddy. His voice came through, loud music in the background, people talking over each other. Just wanted you to know the dinner's going great. Big win for the team. Client really appreciated the show. The show, I repeated. I could hear plates, cutlery, a low male voice saying something about marbling. Yeah, beers are flowing, steaks are insane. This is real money up here. You'd love it. Glad it's going well, I said. There was a pause, then a chuckle. Listen, in case Jenna's texting you or something, if you swing by, don't get weird. We didn't order for you. This is the booked list only. Little perk for the people who needed to be here, you know? He said it lightly, like it was a joke, like I was a kid asking if I could sit at the grown-up table at Thanksgiving. We didn't order for you. I repeated it once more, slower, like he wanted to make sure it landed. I stared at the empty parking lot in front of me, the streetlights buzzing. I wasn't planning on coming, I said. Good man. Keep the home fires burning. He laughed, then someone called his name and he hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there with the phone still in my hand. I could have thrown it at the dashboard, punched the steering wheel, screamed. Instead, something much smaller happened. It felt like a click. A tiny, precise click somewhere inside my chest. Like a lock turning the other way for the first time in years. I finished the burger, wiped my hands on a napkin, and went upstairs. The apartment was quiet. I took off the shirt I'd ironed for nothing and hung it back up. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't pour a drink. I just sat at the small kitchen table, listening to the hum of the fridge, replaying his voice in my head. We didn't order for you. When I came into the office Monday morning out of a dinner, and the world looked the same. It told me exactly where I stood. In a place that I'd given years of the one where everyone suddenly remembers what they laughed at the other night, pretend not to see it, and now they're not sure if you remember. And the strange thing is, I felt once eyes finally before I sat down. You stop begging to be on the other side. Eyes, just people think that was the night I got humiliated. Measuring, they're wrong. Jenna was the first to approach. Moment wasn't she hovered near my desk. It was the invitation, as if I were a campfire. She wasn't sure she had permission to sit beside. Hey, she said quietly. About Friday. It's fine, I cut in. It's not. Her mouth tightened. They shouldn't have done that. They did, I said. Nothing to analyze. She looked like she wanted to argue, but Clark walked in then. Loud, refreshed, carrying the exact swagger of a man who believes the world secretly revolves around his meal choices. He clapped me on the back as he passed, harder than necessary. Buddy, good weekend? He asked. Yeah, I said, turning toward my screen. He lingered, waiting for me to ask about the dinner, about the steak, about the stories. When I didn't, he shifted his stance like someone trying to resettle into a chair that suddenly wasn't comfortable anymore. Anyway, he said, straightening his tie, we've got a busy week. Let's stay sharp. He left. My screen glowed back at me like it knew something I didn't want to say out loud yet. By lunch, the whole department had adjusted to a new microclimate, the silent aftermath of an ugly joke no one wanted responsibility for. People weren't mean, they were cautious, polite in that artificial tiptoeing way people get when they're afraid of what you might be thinking. I ate at my desk. Around 1 p.m., I went to the printer room to pick up a stack of invoices, and that's when I overheard it. Clark talking to Liam and 2 finance guys. Look, he was saying, Evan's good at numbers, but he's not client material. Friday wasn't a big deal. You don't put your back-end guy in front row seats. That's not how you grow a team. Back-end guy. He said it like I was plumbing. Liam chuckled. Still rough to leave him hanging like that? Clark shrugged. He should be grateful he's even in the building half the time. Some people don't have the charisma for certain rooms. That's not my fault. That's genetics. I stood there with my hand on the paper tray, feeling something I hadn't felt the other night. Irritation. The kind that starts behind your ribs like a warm, cutting edge. When they left, I collected the printouts. The invoices weren't mine. Clark had printed them. A week's worth of vendor meetings. I skimmed the totals. They didn't match anything on our budgeting spreadsheet. Interesting. I set them on the counter for him to collect. But before I walked out, something made me glance again. Each receipt was coded under a client development, charged to a card with Clark's initials. The places listed weren't meeting locations. They were bars, lounges, a place I recognized as a cocktail bar with a velvet rope and an entry fee. Client meetings on a Wednesday, at places that don't open before 9 p.m. I didn't touch the papers again. I didn't need to. The seed was planted. By Wednesday morning, Clark was back in my space. Evan, need you to clean up the cost forecast. Presentable version. Execs want a clean look. That's not due for 2 weeks, I said. Well, he replied, I want it now. Make me look good. He winked like we were co-conspirators. I opened the file, already feeling the tension settle in my shoulders. Hours later, when I sent the polished version, he wrote back, Perfect. Sending to the execs. FYI. I removed your name from the footer. Looks cleaner. Looks cleaner. My name. Removed. From the work I wrote. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed level. Instead, I felt something settle into place. That same click from Friday night, now louder, sharper. After work, I went home and opened my laptop. Company policy allowed employees to access their own project files, budgets, expense logs. It wasn't spying. It was auditing my own work. I pulled up the expense report from the last quarter. The first inconsistency was easy to find. The next was easier. The third wasn't even subtle. A vendor onboarding dinner at a restaurant that didn't sell anything under $150. There was no vendor onboarding that week. What really got me wasn't the money. It was how sloppy he'd gotten, like he believed he was untouchable. Over the next few days, I noticed more. Clark approving his own purchases, Clark signing off on reimbursements, Clark marking meetings that never appeared on our calendars. This wasn't negligence. This was routine. On Friday, Clark approached my desk with that same buddy-buddy smile that made my skin tighten. Need you to stay late tonight, he said. We've got some numbers to clean before the exec call tomorrow. Important we shine. I can't stay tonight, I said. The words surprised even me. Simple, flat, delivered with the calm of someone returning a wrong order at a restaurant. Clark blinked. Excuse me? I have plans. He laughed. Not a real laugh. The theatrical kind meant to put me back into place. Evan, come on. We've all got plans. This is part of being a team player. No, I said. This is part of covering other people's slack. His jaw tightened. For a split second, he didn't know which mask to put on. Then he leaned in. "You're treading into unprofessional territory," he said softly. "So are your expense reports," I replied just as softly. He froze, just long enough for me to confirm I'd hit something. "What did you just say?" he asked. "I said your reports need attention," I answered, turning back to my screen. "Have a good night, Clark." He stood there, a silhouette in my peripheral vision, rigid, uncertain, before walking away. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't have a comeback. That night, in my apartment, I sat at the table again. Same chair, same hum of the fridge, same quiet, but not the same man. Because Friday night wasn't the moment he humiliated me. It was the moment he told me exactly where to start looking. I didn't know it yet, but that one dinner cost him everything. Once you notice one crack, you start seeing the whole wall differently. I didn't set out to take Clark down. I didn't have a plan, a timeline, or some dramatic revenge fantasy. What I did have was clarity, the kind that doesn't shout. It hums, quiet, steady, patient. The following Monday, Clark arrived edgy. Not visibly, he still barked orders and laughed too loud, but something in the rhythm was off. He hovered around my desk more than usual, asking vague questions, checking in on team morale, pretending not to watch me watching him. He knew I'd seen something. He just didn't know what or how much, or whether I was the type to do anything. The uncertainty gnawed at him. That was my first small win. The second came that afternoon. I was updating the revenue sheet when I noticed that Clark had approved a reimbursement for a dinner labeled Client Debrief Paris Team. That was interesting, considering the Paris team hadn't been in our country for 6 months. I clicked open the file. The restaurant was a quiet, ultra-luxury place known for not asking questions, the kind where receipts didn't itemize dishes, just wrote chef's tasting experience, $520. There was another one the next week, vendor negotiation, luxe room, same price range. Then 4 rideshare receipts past midnight, coded as late client coordination. I checked our client calendar. No meetings, no calls, no activity. It wasn't just sloppy. It was arrogant. I began pulling everything into a private folder. Expense logs, travel claims, reimbursements, submissions signed off by Clark, dates that didn't match, places he couldn't have been. It wasn't detective work, it was housekeeping. Cleaning up a mess someone else assumed no one would ever inspect. Around 5 p.m., Clark walked over. "Need a sec," he said, waving me toward a conference room. His fingers were drumming on the table before I even sat down. "So," he began, "you've been off." "Off," I repeated. "Distant, disconnected. Uncooperative?" He leaned forward. "If there's an issue, I need to know." I kept my voice factual. "The issue is the workload distribution and the way you speak about people who do the work." He blinked slowly. "Evan, don't play the martyr. You've always been reliable. Don't make this complicated. It already is." He shifted, crossing his arms. "Look, I don't know what you think you heard or saw, but you need to tread carefully. Gossip creates liabilities." "I don't gossip," I said. "No," he agreed. "You simmer." For a second his real face showed, the one behind the friendliness, the one that only came out when he felt the ground under him tilt. The tension in his jaw flickered like a bad wire. "Let me be clear," he said quietly. "You don't want to make enemies where you can make allies." "And you don't want to keep talking like this," I replied. It was the first time I'd ever said something he couldn't immediately frame as disobedience. It was just true, plain, level, unshakable. And he felt it. That was my micro-catharsis, watching him realize I wasn't playing the role he assigned anymore. The next few days were an exercise in subtle warfare. Clark suddenly started copying 2 extra managers on every email to me, as if building a paper trail in advance. He held impromptu team huddles, where he emphasized unity and performance, but his eyes never left me. He volunteered updates to directors, praised my work loudly in public, then nitpick the same work in private. That's what fear looks like when it wears a suit. Meanwhile, I kept collecting. I didn't alter anything, didn't access what I wasn't supposed to, didn't touch his files. I just traced the lines he'd already drawn. One night, close to 9 p.m., I found the thing that changed everything. The Client Hospitality Fund, an internal pool meant for actual client entertaining, had been drained by nearly 80%. Over half the transactions were Clark's, and one receipt included a booking for a private lounge room at a location known for being, let's just say, off corporate policy. That was no longer sloppy. That was fireable. The next morning, I requested a brief meeting with internal audit. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic. Just, I've noticed inconsistencies I think you should review. I attached a curated subset, not the full picture, enough to show a pattern, not enough to trigger a panic. They thanked me, told me they'd take it from there. 2 hours later, audit emailed Clark requesting supporting documentation for several expenses. By noon, 2 department heads had emailed him as well. By 2 p.m., Clark called me into another conference room. He didn't close the door gently this time. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Perform due diligence," I said. "You're making me look dirty." "You did that." "You think you're untouchable?" His voice began to rise. I stayed seated. "No, I think I'm accurate." He paced, breath sharp. "You don't understand how this works. You don't go digging. You don't question leadership. You don't misuse company funds," I said. "You don't lie on reports. You don't demean people you rely on." The words landed like stones, heavy, unavoidable. He exhaled shakily, running his hands over his hair. "You're finished here," he whispered. "Maybe," I said, "but not today." Something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger, not fear, recognition. He understood that the narrative had shifted. He no longer controlled it. Later that afternoon, I watched him walk into a meeting with 2 people from audit and 1 from HR. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff. He didn't look at me. For the rest of the week, he was quieter. He came in earlier, left later. His laugh faded. His emails got shorter. His voice lost its edge. And for the first time since I met him, he didn't walk like the floor belonged to him. That was the beginning of the fall. Not loud, not explosive. Just gravity doing what it always does when the support beams give way. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The official email didn't come with thunder or sirens. It arrived on a Tuesday at 9:07 a.m. Just another subject line in a crowded inbox. Temporary organizational changes, Department 3B. I opened it because everyone opened it. The entire floor went quiet as monitors glowed the same message across 12 desks. Effective immediately, Clark Reynolds is placed on administrative leave, pending internal review of financial procedures. In the interim, Evan Hart will serve as acting team lead for Department 3B. There it was. No adjectives, no drama, just a simple reshuffling of words that shifted the weight of the room. Jenna turned in her chair, eyes wide. "Did you know?" she mouthed. I shook my head. I hadn't known. I'd only turned on the light. The rest was gravity and paperwork. Within an hour, Clark's office was half emptied. Not dramatically, no security escort, no box walk of shame. He came in pale and collected, went straight to his door, and began packing. I watched from my desk, fingers still on the keyboard, as he wrapped his framed certificates in old reports. At one point, he looked up. Our eyes met. There was no fire there, no fury, just the numb comprehension of a man who'd finally realized the story he'd been telling about himself was no longer the one other people believed. He didn't come over. He didn't speak. Maybe he had a speech prepared in his head. Maybe he was smart enough to know that anything he said could only make it worse. He left without a goodbye. For the rest of the week, people moved around me like I was made of something fragile and explosive at the same time. HR sent me a polite message. "We appreciate your diligence and professionalism in recent weeks." Senior management scheduled a check-in to support the transition. Support sounded like a big word for what they actually did. Give me Clark's responsibilities without Clark's pay. For now. I didn't argue. They needed someone to keep the lights on. I'd been doing that job for years anyway. What changed wasn't the work, it was the air. Meetings got shorter, jokes got less mean. People stopped looking over their shoulder every time they mentioned a mistake. We still had deadlines and stress and badly designed spreadsheets, but the edge of fear that lived under everything began to thin. Jenna knocked on my new office doorframe one afternoon. "Hey, boss," she teased, then softened. "Seriously, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said. "This isn't revenge. It's just correction." She studied me. "You know they're talking about making it permanent, right?" "I know," I said. "Doesn't mean they will." "Want my vote?" she asked. "It's not that kind of election." "Should be," she muttered, and left. 2 weeks later, the temporary title came off. This time, the email was more decorated. In recognition of his contribution, stability, integrity. Words they hadn't used before, at least not in my direction. My raise wasn't huge, but it was real. My decisions were, too. One morning, while going through routine correspondence, I saw something that made my chest tighten in a different way. The company had received another hospitality voucher as an apology from the client for a scheduling mess on their side. A second dinner at the same high-end restaurant. 8 seats, fixed menu, no cost to us. The message was simple. "We hope your team can enjoy another evening." I sat with that email longer than I expected. The last time that place intersected with my life, I was eating a drive-through burger in a parking lot while my manager told me I wasn't worth a seat. Now I had 8 to give away. I could have declined it, could have given it to another department, could have pretended the past didn't exist. Instead, I booked the reservation. This time, the list was mine. I started with the people who did the work. Jenna from analysis, the 2 junior staff who stayed late without being asked, the soft-spoken guy from finance who quietly fixed Clark's math more times than anyone knew. I left 2 seats for the new director and HR liaison. They'd back the audit when it mattered. No one was excluded to send a message. No one was invited as a prop. On Friday night, we arrived as a group. No speeches, no dress code lecture. Just a handful of tired people in their best shirts, trying to remember how to relax in public. The host greeted us with polished warmth. "Party for 8? "Yes," I said. "Heart." We were led into the same dining room I'd glimpsed in Jenna's blurry photo weeks before. Soft lighting, heavy cutlery, the kind of chairs that make you sit straighter without noticing. As we took our seats, I let myself look around. That's when I saw him. At the far side of the room, near the service station, a man in a black apron was clearing plates. Hair shorter, shoulders tighter, face leaner. Clark. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy stacking dishes, answering a waiter, avoiding the manager's eye. His movements were precise and a little too fast, the choreography of someone still trying to prove they deserved to be in the room. He turned, tray in hand, and froze for a fraction of a second when he recognized me. It was quick, just a blink, but I saw it, the flinch of memory. Jenna followed my gaze and went very still. "Is that—" "Yeah," I said quietly. He didn't come over. He couldn't. This wasn't his floor anymore. It wasn't his invitation. It wasn't his story to narrate. The waiter arrived, cheerful and trained. He talked us through the menu, the cuts, the pairings. I listened, really listened this time, instead of imagining what the food might taste like somewhere else. When he asked for our orders, I kept it simple. "Same for everyone," I said. "Steak, medium, whatever you'd recommend. And if someone wants something different, we'll make space. Nobody gets left out." It wasn't a speech. It was just logistics. But Jenna smiled into her water glass, and one of the juniors quickly blinked away something wet. The food came. It was good. Better than good. But it wasn't the point. The real difference wasn't on the plates. It was in the way people talked. No one had to compete to be heard. No one was the punchline. We told stupid stories, laughed at our own mistakes, mapped out projects for the next quarter without anyone stealing adjectives. At some point, when the table was loudest, I felt a shift in myself I didn't expect. A small dropping away of an old weight I'd been carrying so long I'd stopped feeling it. I'd always thought justice would feel sharp, electric, explosive. It didn't. It felt quiet. On my way back from the restroom, I crossed paths with Clark near the service door. For a moment, we were the only two people in the narrow corridor. "Evan," he said, almost under his breath. "Clark." He looked older, not in years, but in miles. "How's the Haas team?" he asked us as if he didn't already know the answer. "Working," I said, "like always." He swallowed. "They treating you right?" "Yes." He nodded, eyes bouncing anywhere but my face. "Good, that's good." There were 1,000 things I could have said then. I could have listed every name he'd dismissed, every late night he'd offloaded, every receipt he'd doctored. I could have mentioned the steak, the call, the sentence he'd repeated into my ear like it was nothing. Instead, I just watched him. "I shouldn't have," he started, then stopped. The apology died in his throat, half-formed, like he didn't know if he meant it, or if it was just another reflex. "You made choices," I said simply. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, almost like a choke. "Guess we both did," he replied. "Yeah," I said. "We did." That was it. No handshake, no absolution, no dramatic exit line. I went back to my table. He went back to his tray. By the time dessert came, the tension had left my shoulders. The restaurant buzzed with low conversation, clinking glasses, the occasional burst of laughter. Our table felt steady, grounded, like something built on solid beams instead of show. On the way out, the host thanked me for bringing such a wonderful group. Jenna looped her arm through mine for a second as we stepped into the night air. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I said, and realized I meant it. The night was cool. The street was quiet. My phone was heavy in my pocket, not because of unanswered messages, but because I could finally choose who got answers. People like to imagine karma as a dramatic moment, a speech, an arrest, a collapse. Mine was smaller. It was sitting at a table I'd once been told I didn't deserve, paying nothing for a meal I'd already earned, and knowing I'd never again let someone else decide my worth with a sentence. Respect isn't expensive. You just have to stop giving discounts. He once told me, "We didn't order for you." In the end, he was right about one thing. He never ordered for me. I did.